Good evening again. My name is David Woolcombe, the president of Peace Child International, and it's my privilege to be hosting this intergenerational dialogue tonight. Looking at the UN of the future and hoping that it will survive the next 75 years. When Clement Attlee opened the first UN General Assembly in London in 1945, he said this. He said, "It's worth noting that this United Nations Charter does not start by saying we the governments, but by we the peoples. This is right because the UN is an endeavor to put into practical form the deep feelings of all people." And we've heard quite a lot in the last year during the 75th anniversary about how the United Nations is all about we the peoples, but it's not true, my friends. It's all a lie. The UN is only about governments at the moment. Yes, they acknowledge civil society. Yes, they make a lot of efforts to involve civil society, but the governments pay the United Nations due, and he who pays the piper plays the tune. But I wonder if that might be about to change, and if it can be changed, that would be another San Francisco moment, which is what we're all talking about. So let us think about the UN over the next 75 years and how it might change. And it's instructive to think back to a book written by Peter Russell in the 1980s, where he talked about the global brain, the idea of a global brain. And he was a neuroscientist, and he explained that it takes 10 billion atoms to create one living cell. And there are 10 billion living cells in a human brain. And as we approach 10 billion human brains on planet Earth, might we transition to be able to think like a global brain? And of course, back in the 1980s, there wasn't such a thing as the internet. But now we have the internet. We see how the internet itself is forming itself into a kind of planetary nervous system that links together all people, wherever they are in the world. And so that's why the dream of a people's-led, citizens-led United Nations is not so far away. It might actually be within our grasp. And that's what we're talking about tonight. And here to introduce that idea of a digital UN is Lauren Banham. So over to you, Lauren.
Thank you, David. So I am from the first generation described as digital natives. We live in a world that the UN's founders could never have dreamed of 75 years ago, a digital world. So I asked the question, isn't it time for a digital UN? Together First Stepping Stone report, the Stimson Centre's UN 2.0 proposal, and the UN Global Conversation with We the Peoples all seek to increase citizen engagement. A digital UN would make this conversation a real and lasting part of the UN system. This kind of digital channel could provide the UN's with an ability to promote its existing online presence, but it would also provide people with the ability to be involved in what the UN is already doing and contribute ideas that could in turn have direct influence on the future direction the UN takes. As the song we heard earlier says, we want this world to survive forever. But around the world, leaders and governments have historically and repeatedly failed to take sufficient action on the huge global issues that we all know threaten our survival. As the recent movement led by Greta Thunberg shows, my generation knows all too well that it's our future at risk, and we're incredibly worried about it. Furthermore, these issues encompass more than simply an environmental threat to life, but include threats to the very fabric of humanity. These threats include systemic racism, gender inequality, big data exploitation, misuse of AI, resource and income inequality, all due to broken systems and the failure of governments to deliver fair and selfless leadership. By utilising evolving mobile and online technology, particularly in places where historically all voices have not been heard, we give a voice to the voiceless. We can create a system that empowers people to take action, and we can use the experiences of individuals to make tangible differences to their communities. So this could be a system that transcends the frontiers of nationality, class, ability, religion, language, and age. A digital UN will deliver solutions that ensure a secure future for our world. Through harnessing the passions and creative solutions of all we the people, not simply a select few. We must move in the direction of a fully inclusive UN. Although mindful of technical and logical inequalities and dangers of digital insecurity, more of which my friends will touch on later, it's imperative that we maintain momentum towards the hope provided by meaningful citizen engagement. In summary, a digital UN means accessibility. A digital UN means consensus building through citizens' assembly. It means inclusivity, and most importantly, a digital UN means moving forward to survival for me, for you, and for those whose voices have not yet been heard. Thank you. Thomas?
Thank you, Lauren. Dag Hammarskjöld famously said, "The UN was not created to take humanity to heaven, but to save it from hell." Its charter requires the UN to save humanity from the scourge of war. As it redefines its role for the 21st century, the UN should recall those iconic commitments as it seeks to save humanity from the scourge or hell of digital anarchy. Not since the days of the East India Company have private companies enjoyed such freedom and blissful lack of corporate regulation to plunder the world's wealth for themselves, or in this case, user data for a financial gain. The largest digital companies have profit margins many times that of some of the UN member states' GDPs. Many of them use digital technologies and AI to map our behaviors, influence our elections, and conduct mass surveillance to control and oppress their people. People are literally being tortured and killed as a result of what they may say or do online. Also, fine military minds are designing ever more elaborate cyber weapons that drones fire from the comfort of our computer or hack a mobile phone through WhatsApp. And yet, the internet retains its immense potential to benefit humanity. Throughout this COVID-19 crisis, it has kept families connected, businesses operating, and all of us entertained by streaming services. It has delivered the death of distance and the dissolution of national, cultural, and linguistic barriers. It is the biggest repository of freely accessible knowledge and information the world has ever known. And through the careful application of AI technologies and robotics, it retains the potential to transform every aspect of human life, from education to healthcare to manufacturing, nutrition, and leisure activities. Further, it can be a force for convergence and collaboration and transform the way we unite peoples and nations. Our workshop yesterday on digital security discussed three themes to explore how organizations and governments should respond to present and future digital issues. The first was human rights in the digital age, the second was trust and transparency, and the third was cybersecurity. Here are my colleagues Sebastian and Anahita to give feedback on our discussions.
Thank you, Thomas. Data collection is growing exponentially. The UN estimates that 90% of all digital data has been created only in the last 2 years. Until 10 years ago, these massive amounts of data used to be called big data because they were simply too big to be analyzed. Today, with artificial intelligence, tech companies can process big data in real time. But we're only seeing the beginning of AI. In the short term, we will see dramatic impacts on our privacy as increasingly sensitive data is collected from our phones, smartwatches, CCTV, or online activity. In the medium term, artificial intelligence will become more accurate in predicting our behavior and desires, making it more convenient for us to rely on it rather than our own thinking. Towards the end of this century, but probably still in my lifetime, AI will surpass human intelligence and, if unchecked, could challenge our further existence even. The UN has already set up a working group, a group of governmental experts, and an advisory board on AI. However, they only provide guidance.
Sebastian, you're breaking up. I think if you can't do that, maybe we should go straight to Anahita.
How ironic that he lost connection.
Oh, well.
Sorry, no, David, Sebastian's absolutely clear. It might just be your connection. I'm really sorry, Sebastian. Do please carry on.
No worries at all. Yeah, so the working group, the group of governmental experts, the advisory board on AI, they're all just there to provide guidance or serve as a platform. But that's great. Is it really that what we need? Is it anything like enough to deal with the single biggest transformation of the last 75 years? We need so much more. First, in the workshop yesterday, we proposed an AI security treaty. This treaty could include main aspects of the EU's General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, but on a global level. The standards here in Europe were set high, but they lack enforcement, even in Europe, but even more so abroad. But of course, an AI security treaty has to go beyond the action that we need today, as we can't know what will be developed tomorrow. We need what I call a digital security council that can react quickly to technological progress and, as the real security council, has the power to tackle these issues that appear suddenly and without warning. It could be usefully supported by Lauren's idea for a citizen-led digital UN, and it would be a way to avoid non-binding resolutions and slow policymaking that keeps falling behind. For the long-term threats from superintelligence, the AI security treaty would also formalize the necessary standards when developing human-level machine intelligence. Vladimir Putin said, "The one who becomes the leader in AI will become the ruler of the world." So if we want to avoid an arms race between the global superpowers that is more dangerous than any nuclear weapons race in the past, we have to act now. Technology is progressing fast, so we need to be faster. With this, I'm handing over to Anahita now to tell us more about yesterday's workshop.
Thank you, Sebastian. As you can see, there is still so much to understand about what a digital kind of security might mean. But one thing is certain. When we begin to reflect on this, we must ensure that our efforts at building a more secure digital space are inclusive, constructive, and impactful. The online space has served as a brilliant and effective tool for collective action, empowering marginalized communities by offering a space for activism and expression. From the coordinated women's marches across the globe, the simple #MeToo movement, BLM, and the Arab Spring, the online space has facilitated interconnectedness, contributing to huge strides taken in the fight for equality across societies. But whilst it can empower, it can also be dangerous, mysterious, and even unsafe. For example, women face sexual harassment, children are at risk of grooming, and people of color are exposed to racist narratives every day. We're expected to have technology at our fingertips. As we've learnt, however, during this pandemic, not everybody is of the same privilege. In the UK, many young school children struggle to attend classes online due to lack of internet access, laptops, and computers in their home. Does this make them secure? Does this make them equal? Maybe this must be considered a new basic human right. Technology has even brought about the risk of new warfare, cyber wars, hacks, and even killer robots. The threat of nuclear war grows, and we cannot stand by as these developments potentially threaten our global futures. We have a responsibility to act now, to work to strengthen our practices of digital security for the benefit of all. The UN must serve as a tool through which we can empower people and build our global digital security. As suggested by our workshop yesterday, we must build a stronger culture of consent, involve diverse voices as consultants in technological development, and explore means of incentivizing states to build stronger legal frameworks to protect individual digital rights, but to also educate their citizens on what their digital rights actually entail. It's crucial that we do this whilst integrating an intersectional lens to ensure that our efforts are inclusive and constructive. Multilateralism is the key to moving forwards. The Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is a brilliant demonstration of multilateralism facilitating powerful peace building. It's the first legally binding international agreement to comprehensively prohibit nuclear weapons, with the goal of leading towards their total elimination. Every member state has the ability to adopt and subsequently ratify the treaty. Small states have shown solidarity by ratifying and working together to push for this possibility. As of yesterday, with only one state left to ratify, the TPNW is closer than ever to entry into force. We must be inspired to take similar action to build a more secure digital world. A treaty through which states can come together to ensure that proper measures are taken. Maybe a new updated Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as Toma calls it, a UDHR 2.0, if you will, would reconceptualize our understanding of basic human rights, addressing the new age that we live in and all of the issues that I have raised today. A global intersectional effort to tackle these questions will build a more secure space for all. Handing over to Ella.
Thank you, Anahita. Hi, I'm Ella Fay. I'm an actor and activist with Extinction Rebellion, and I'm here because I support Lauren's idea for a digital UN because it feeds directly into one of XR's key demands, which is for citizens' assemblies. I'm here because this talk of global conversations, high-level focal points to strengthen citizen engagement isn't really getting us anywhere. As we saw in the new David Attenborough documentary, your generation has pushed life on this planet into terminal decline, in which we could all become part of the next great extinction. That's we, the peoples. And yet still, in the words of Anton Chekhov, we live in a climate where blizzards are a daily occurrence, and yet we stand around having polite conversations. As Lauren said, it's our survival at stake here, and the survival of every living thing on this planet. And that's why we protest, that's why we glue ourselves to bridges, stop the traffic, hold school strikes, and stop the distribution of newspapers that tell humanity nothing of these issues. But rage and protest isn't always enough. We have to actually change laws and lifestyles. And we cannot keep leaving these decisions to dormant world leaders because it's just too late. That's why we need the UN to commission a series of international citizens' assemblies. These would bring together 100 people representing every sector of society, young, old, rich, poor, and most importantly, it gives a voice to the marginalised who are already suffering and dying right now from the effects of violence, injustice, and climate catastrophe. Members would serve like they would do jury service for the planet. They're paid to attend 10 to 15 days of online meetings to listen to expert statements and reach a consensus decision that they then present back to the government or the UN that commissions them. This then must be followed up with a referendum. Unlike the UK House of Commons attempt at a citizens' assembly, which is likely to go absolutely nowhere because no mechanism was put in place to secure the outcome. We need this in place. And if the UN member governments don't want to listen, we will only get louder. We'll block more roads and we'll cause more havoc because what is the alternative solution? We need to restore humanity's faith in the political process by giving we, the peoples, direct ownership of decision making. The internet didn't exist when the UN Charter was drafted back in 1945, but it does now. So if we truly want to reinvent the UN for the 21st century, then we have to embrace this idea. A safe, digital UN, an international citizens' assembly across the globe, will give us a platform to work together when so many of us have felt so alone in this fight. To hold each other's hand across the globe and know that we, the peoples, can do this together. Thank you. Back to David.
Yes, can you hear me? No.
I think that they are very good, but we need to also realize that in the world out there, there's a huge digital divide between and within countries and communities. So there are people with no or little access to affordable broadband, especially women and youth in many communities, the people on the move, displaced population, undocumented workers, refugees, people whom I work with very often with precarious lives and work. But we need to close this gap as part of our COVID-19 recovery plan. So I hope you will ask for that as well. I mean, you provide us with a glimpse of our hellish future and the nature of cyber wars if we don't take urgent actions now. And you have also highlighted that even without the wars, cyber security issues, cyber crimes are on the rise. And that these are concerns that will impact human agency and decision making. But I want to go even further to talk about corporate governance that have privileged the rich, the corrupt, and the powerful. It is about tax evasion and tax havens draining resources for global public goods and the health of both people and planet. We can do so much more, but people keep saying, oh, we don't have the resources. How come the resources are so concentrated in people and in places where they should not be concentrated in.
Who's in the chair? Should someone be telling us who's speaking next?
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I'm just getting you all ready onto the stage. Okay,
right. Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry to have left you all hanging out to dry there. I just suddenly got back on stage. So welcome to the Elders panel. This is an intergenerational dialogue. So what we've heard from so far is the ideas of the younger generation for how to sort out the challenges that face them in the next 75 years. And what we're looking for now is the reaction of you, the elders, to their ideas. And you just heard Noeline Heyzer, the founder of UNIFEM, and also a leader of the Asian UN office, give her views. So maybe we can come first to you, Tom. Tom is the one of the co-directors of Global Optimism and the author of this book, which we're all quoting from, The Future We Choose. So Tom, are the young people right to think that the future we choose lies in a possible digital UN?
Well, I mean, I think it's an essential part of the future that we choose. So, so first of all, I thought that was amazing, and I really appreciated the passion and the verve and the dedication and the preparation that everyone's clearly put into that. I love the quote from Chekhov. I would respond with one from Mark Twain, who said that everyone talks about the weather, but no one does anything about it. And I think that's absolutely what we now have to do, because that's kind of running out of control. So just a few points. One is the UN is extremely popular at the moment. You wouldn't know it if you listen to national leaders who kind of claim that international collaboration is somehow trying to undermine their national interest. International collaboration, talking rather than pointing guns at people, agreeing to do big collective things together, is extremely popular. And we need to use that very much to our advantage. The next thing I say is, the Paris Agreement, we knew when we were negotiating it that it was the foothills of the collaboration that we were going to need to achieve. And we used to say to each other that this was difficult, but it's nothing compared to the water and the food negotiations of the 2040s and the 2050s that people are going to have to negotiate. So what we talked about doing was strengthening the muscle of collaboration and cooperation and negotiation that would be needed far more as time kind of ran on. I really appreciate the focus on digital. I mean, I really think that it's going to be such a fundamental part of the future. And I really like the idea of a digital security council. But I have a question around that. One of the ways in which we achieved the Paris Agreement was actually by opening the sphere of engagement from just governments to other types of stakeholders. When the UN was conceived 75 years ago, governments were the preeminent actors in global affairs. But now you have, as you said, corporations, investors, many other types of entities that are major players on the global stage. And one of the ways that we found we could be successful in a collaborative venture was actually to fling the doors open, because they wanted to be part of that progressive movement that could actually get on top of this issue. I wonder whether this can be done uniquely by governments. And my question back to you is, can this, rather than being a government regulated process, somehow be more inclusive and involve other elements of society, including those that we're worried about taking more control, in order to find a way forward that includes everybody?
Thank you very much, Tom. Let me now introduce Richard Ponzio from Washington, D.C., who was actually hosting an event about the UN of the future yesterday and is the author of a fabulous report called UN 2.0. So what do you think, Richard? And what's your question to the young people? Thank you.
Thank you, David. I don't normally wear a tie on a Saturday afternoon here in Washington, D.C. This is my UN blue tie, though, for the occasion today. I really enjoyed the 5 fabulous presentations. Lauren on a digital UN, Toma on avoiding digital anarchy, Sebastian's ideas about a digital security council, Anahita on a universal declaration of human rights 2.0, and Ella's Citizens Assembly plan. And I love how they came together in many ways, something that our colleague Natalie might speak to as well. The UN75 declaration was adopted last month by world leaders. It actually has a commitment toward a shared vision on digital cooperation and a digital future, that the full potential for beneficial technology usage and addressing digital trust and security. I think each of the proposals help to elaborate and give some definition to that commitment by world leaders. I would actually, though, encourage all participants in this type of discussion to study the phenomenal success story, which was the online consultations leading into the 2015-2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the big program of action we have 10 more years to go. And again, Natalie might speak to the global conversation for UN75, over 1 million participants, lots of lessons to learn about that digital consultation. Our own thinking, and then I have a question about, are we advocating global referendum to have direct citizens participation? How will that work with technology? Our own UN 2.0 report that David mentioned and Lauren spoke to as well in her remarks, we have 2 specific proposals that I think are linked to this discussion today. A UN global partnership, and here we advocate for not just civil society to be involved in implementing projects with the UN, but very much involved in policy making. And again, I refer you to the 2030 Agenda, the success story of the world's largest online consultation to shape that important agenda, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. On the question, though, about the downside risks, cybersecurity, we speak to 2 proposals. I won't go into any detail here, maybe later in today's discussion, but ideas such as a standby roster for cybersecurity experts and regional networks for fighting cyber crime. These are areas that different parts, you can imagine, the industrialized West have developed, but it's not global yet. And as more and more countries come online, and that's critical for overcoming the digital divide in the world, they also need to have these safety measures to participate actively and constructively in the global marketplace through digital connectivity. I'll stop there. David, you might be frozen.
Thank you very much, Richard. Can we go straight to Natalie, who, as Richard was explaining there, is involved in the UN75 global conversation, but also the Stepping Stones report and the whole Together First initiative, which we've all learned so much from. What did you think, Natalie, and what would be your question to the young people?
So thanks so much for your ideas. I mean, they were fantastic. They're really, really thought-provoking, much better than lots of things I see being put forward at the UN. I have to say, often when I hear, especially high-level debates on digital issues, I wonder how many of these people have ever actually used a computer, used social media, have any idea what's going on, and I'm worried. So, thank you for giving me a little bit of confidence and optimism here. I thought they were well thought through, very realistic as well. But I do want to give you 5 very short things to consider. The first, I'm not going to go to in any detail because I think as the only woman left standing on this panel, I will quote the first woman who spoke in the video and say the digital divide issue is huge. And if we're starting to rely, on tools, especially the Citizens Assembly idea, which I love, we need to think about how do the 3.7 billion people in this world who do not have internet access benefit from that, and what do we need to do to get them, through this level. We see it's a problem even in rich countries. It's a much bigger problem in least developed countries, where it's less than a fifth of the population that has an access. And so we heard from Noeline, it's women, the marginalized, who are most affected. The second thing I really want to talk about, and a couple of you touched on this, is politics. I am immensely frustrated every day that even the tiniest things, small wording tweaks, especially when it comes to issues on climate, are so hard to get through. I wonder how much effort we would be putting into and time into creating something like a Digital Security Council. I'd be scared, if I'm honest, to reopen discussions on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's not as up to date as it should be. It's pretty damn good. And given the backlash on things such as women's rights, on racial equality, etc., that we're seeing at the moment, I'd be very, very worried about that. And then there's the issue that Tom raised. I don't think governments are really in the driving seat in many of these issues. Tech is one example, but we know we need a whole of society response if we're going to solve most of the challenges we face. So there's just that question. Given the politics, do we want to use those routes, or do we want to be more creative? And I'm the UN person arguing against the UN, but I think these ideas can go forward. The best ideas come from outside the system and are then taken up because there's proof of concept. And I think the UN75 consultation and declaration that Richard spoke about, that's a huge opportunity there. I will commit to passing on these ideas and feeding them in. There will be a follow-up process led by the Secretary General. And, please, David, connect me with these young people afterwards, and you can be part of that panel and part of that process. I will make it happen. But my question to you is, if everything you've proposed happens, what next? Think bigger. What, Citizens Assembly, great. That's a mechanism. It's a process. What are we looking to achieve? Is it moving towards a totally different international system that isn't state-centric, that isn't about us and them and institutions, but a global partnership, for example? So what would you do with if we said, yes, magic wand, everything's happened, what comes after that? I think it can help to think of the next step sometimes. But thank you again for these wonderful ideas.
Thank you, Natalie. I hope I can come on. Yes, I'm beginning to get a sense of what it's like to be one of the 3.7 billion without the internet tonight, because this is cracking up so much. But let me bring on Sri, who is from South Africa, because I'd like you to answer that question and also to ask your own question of the young people. But what's your answer to Natalie's question about what next, Sri? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, David. I think, Natalie brings up a very poignant question of what next. And, I think the presentations by the panelists were very well-rounded and came together to give you a holistic view of how technology can be used to transform people's ideas in public spaces and to capture those ideas. But the what next question is a big question. And for me, my question to the young panelists would be, is it not that the UN 2.0 that you're speaking of should seek to address and call for action to address some of the fundamental structural problems within the organization that today we are celebrating? The reform of the Security Council and the opening up of that platform, the powers of veto that lay with the dominant powers in the world today. These are all critical issues that still reign supreme within the UN but have not been addressed, largely because of power politics and the realpolitik that is at play in the world today, be it economically or militarily. So if we are looking to a UN 2.0 and implementing digital solutions, calling for a global voice to request the reform of the United Nations and for the inclusion of the political South in the decision-making structures that ultimately govern the world are critical, I think, to moving this dialogue forward. I think also, the discussion around artificial intelligence is something that is fascinating. AI has the power to transform the world, and it's linked to very closely to that of quantum computing. And, these are very first world developed country narratives that come out because the money, the power, the economic rationale that is needed to sustain these technologies is something that is only found in the developed world and not the developing world. So you have to also ask is whose agenda do these technologies serve in their development? And through the voices of bringing everyone together in a UN 2.0, can we harness these technologies for the South? Or will the South simply be once more left by the wayside as it was during the nuclear revolution? Thank you.
Thank you very much. When we started this whole process, we were talking with the Wolf Institute about how uniting faiths and working interfaith would help uniting nations. And I'm very pleased to welcome now Ed Kessler, who is the founder of the Wolf Institute in Cambridge. And I wonder, Ed, how you react to what you've heard this evening. Do you feel there's value in what the young people are proposing?
I'd like to take this opportunity to respond very briefly to each of the members of the youth panel to give them the respect they deserve. And starting with Lauren and the sort of outlier of the call for the digital UN, it seems to me in my area, which is looking at relations between religions, the impact of COVID-19 has been that religions have had to go online, have had to work out how to use technology, have had to work out how to change their understanding, if you like, of physicality and community. I think there are some things to learn from that. In terms of Thomas and your discussion of surveillance and governance and surveillance capitalism, I completely agree that there needs to be a recalibration, if you like, a rebalancing. And again, I think that the way to do that, I would say that in Cambridge is through education, is through, for example, making sure that AI or internet technology or coding are compulsory subjects at school, so that people who come out of school, whether they come out at 15 or 16 or 18, have some understanding of that technology. Sebastian, your reflections, particularly on AI, it seems to me that we need a real ethical discussion. What are the ethics of AI? What makes a good AI? There hasn't been enough discussion of that as far as I can see. And I think your input into that would be particularly helpful. Anahita, this conversation about a new UN declaration, I agree with Natalie that we don't want to open up and allow the fantastic declaration, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, to be undermined. But we do need a kind of new settlement, and that is it should be a universal right to have access to the internet. It doesn't exist, but that should be our aspiration. I think there is some kind of emerging consensus, though, in terms of that need, and we need to exploit that consensus where it exists, because we have to bring people with us, not simply pull the string too hard and it breaks the cord. And Ella, your call for rage, your call for action, the work of and the action of Extinction Rebellion. There is nothing wrong with rage. There is nothing wrong with rage. There's nothing wrong with activism. There's nothing wrong with being direct in your action to a certain extent. When it gets to be violent, that's where there is a real problem. But rage, no, there's nothing wrong with rage. You have every right to be outraged by the failure of my generation. And I, for one, would be very pleased to take part and support the citizen assemblies that you are calling for, in particular, trying to bring people of faith and religious leaders of every shape and size, of every community, local, not just regional and national, to engage with you. Now, my question, because my generation is always scared of change. And the pace of change is happening so dramatically. And your generation, the youth panel that you represent, are actually pioneering that change. So what advice do you have for me, for my generation, in terms of managing that change? Because change, the pace of change when it's fast is frightening, it's unsettling, and the reaction is to retreat within and not to engage without. And it seems to me if there's one thing we need to do is to open out our arms rather than to shut them up. So what advice would you give me to open up? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ed. And I do hope that the youth panel got more of those statements than I did, because I did get Ed's last question. But can we go back, Paul, to at least one or two of the youth panel to respond to those ideas and questions that have come back. Now, I don't see any youth panelists on the screen at the moment. Anahita, your ideas, please, first.
Well, thank you so much to all of our elders panel. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you. I think for me, especially in terms of the UDHR 2.0, I think it's really important to remember that it would not at all mean that we would rip up the existing document or completely disregard it. It would be simply updating it so that it's more appropriate for the times. Because, for example, even at a very far stretch, the US Constitution, when it comes to the legal realm, is still taken advantage of and manipulated because of its ambiguity in terms of race or gender sometimes, and some of the more modern issues that we deal with. And I think that looking to update the UDHR because of all the brilliant foundational values it's provided us with would only strengthen a lot of the existing frameworks that we have on an institutional level, on a state level, to be able to better safeguard and protect individual citizens. And another thing that I thought was quite interesting was in regards to the issue of, for example, the Paris Agreement and how we involved much wider kind of realms of people and individuals and corporations even. And I think one thing that I would always push for is civil society engagement. I think we have a huge responsibility to better engage and to mainstream diverse voices. That means women of color, LGBTQ, people of color, and youth, because once you do that, you have a much more holistic approach to all of the issues that we deal with. For example, Natalie, you did mention that sometimes in these spaces, people aren't even familiar with the technology that they're talking about. And I think when we deal with all of these like pressing issues, the wider the range and breadth of involvement, the better and more constructive the solutions that come about. So that's all I have to say for now.
Okay, thank you for leading over, Anahita. I think we just lost David again. Thank you very much for your feedback to all of our experts. I'd like to respond to a few questions that were guided towards AI and the Digital Security Council. First of all, to Shri, I very much agree. We have to make sure that all the discourse around AI doesn't forget the global South, and that the global South profits from it just as much as the other. And actually, the good thing about AI is that once a certain machine learning algorithm is developed, it can be passed on to whoever. I myself, I'm not a particularly good data scientist, but I just downloaded a few programs this summer and developed my own machine learning algorithm, and it's really that easy. And I think through various education programs, we could definitely apply that in so many sectors across the whole world. But I'd very much like to focus on Natalie's point on how this is all feasible, because as someone who has worked in the UN myself for a brief internship, I've noticed the political situation that you have mentioned. I've seen the deadlock in the Security Council. I've seen the US and China and Russia just not talking towards each other, but in totally different directions. But I think when it comes to digital security, we're all much in the same boat. And I think just as the world realized with nuclear weapons that we need to start making treaties, that we need to start to cooperate and collaborate to make sure that none of the nuclear weapons technology are prolified. I think we need that very much now as well. And I think sooner or later, those states will realize that. When it comes to the GDPR, taking it to a global level shouldn't be too hard. The 28 European states, that's how many they used to were, they agree to the GDPR. Why shouldn't the rest of the General Assembly? And when it comes to AI and cybersecurity, these wars could damage the world for the rest of what we will know as. And I think the global superpowers will find a real interest in starting to talk to each other on that. And if they don't, if if everything fails, if we don't get them to agree, there's always one path open, and that is to the treaty that Anahita has mentioned already, the pathway of a treaty like the TPNW, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which I'm happy to say right now for the first time was just ratified for the 50th time 5 minutes ago while we had this discussion. That means it will now turn into effect on 22nd of January 2021, which is exciting news for me and Anahita, who have both worked on this issue. So we're so happy right now. Yeah, so that's always open to us as well. We can always find 50 states who agree that we need to make sure that AI is safe. We need to make sure that our privacy is safeguarded. And I think if young people raise their voices and everyone else, I think we will get there. Thank you.
Thanks, Seb. So thank you so much for all of your responses. I'd just like to touch on what Natalie said first of all. I absolutely agree with you that the digital divide is something that needs to be addressed, and further than that is something that is massively limiting the potential of development in these areas. But I think that there is a certain viewpoint that needs to be addressed of the idea that the way we use technology in Western society is the best way. And there's this, as Shri touched on, there's this developed narrative. And I think that's what we need to call into question, because there's this idea that the way we use technology is the right way, and that in order to save the rest of the world, we have to implement that where they are. But at the end of the day, there are so many states in Africa, there are so many countries that are seen as less economically developed, that are in lots of ways more technologically advanced than we are. So if you look at something like the M-Pesa system in Kenya, and now instituted in, like, I think over 7 countries, if you look at a system like that, they're utilizing the mobile technology in a way that we haven't over here. So I think that whilst it's absolutely something that needs to be addressed, the digital divide, I think we need to go about looking at it in a way that doesn't necessarily view us as the West and the rest being worse. We need to view it in a way that what they already have is their infrastructure of whatever it may be, like using one mobile phone for one community, or whether it's having one computer in a rural village somewhere. It's okay for us to utilize that system as it is, because that's the way that other communities have gone about that. And I think that ties massively into what Ed was saying about getting on board with change. I think that for us to make progress in moving towards all of these goals, we have to be prepared to change and to change our mindsets. I think that we have to be prepared to listen most of all, because for me, the problem that links into all of this, and this is, I think, ties into what Natalie was saying of what would you want to see if we achieved all of this. And I think that needs to be a change in the system of how global relations I think it needs to be a change in the system which forms our leadership, because at the moment we have all these global decisions being made by people in power, people who've reached positions of power through broken systems, and that needs to be changed. So in order to get on board with that change, like Ed was saying, for your generation, I think we all need to listen, we need to have an open conversation, and we need to be prepared to change. Oh. Is my internet crashed? Am I? Okay, there we go.
Hello. So, thanks, Lauren. I just wanted to oh, I've lost connection. Okay, hello. The idea of the referendum with citizens' assemblies is absolutely something we can achieve with the digital UN. And for example, there's a great example of Ireland. They created a citizens' assembly, for example, just to talk about the issues of abortion and listen to expert statements. And that citizens' assembly decided Ireland's history forever. So that's Hello, am I breaking up? Yes. I'll leave with, if you can hear me, we've seen a perfect example of Ireland absolutely using it in the right way. And if we have a secure digital United Nations, we'll absolutely be able to do online referendums as a result of citizens' assemblies.
Okay. As I say, I've only been getting about 20 minutes, but I'd love to hear what Richard Ponzio thinks of that last remark from Ella. Can we bring on Richard Ponzio, please?
Sure, I'm back on, and I'm glad you elaborated. It was
Possibly
a good example that you shared.
Richard, unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm unmuted now, and I hope I can be heard. Just that as you develop these ideas further, you know, the UN, fortunately, has not only focused on a whole modernization agenda linked to the 75th anniversary of the UN. In particular, it's going big on digital. Two major reports to look to for some ideas of where the UN's thinking, but working with civil society, working with private sector partners like Alibaba from China or Microsoft from the United States. And it's the high-level panel on digital cooperation. And then the Secretary General just brought out his digital cooperation roadmap. And he writes that this is about ushering in order, so some degree of stability in this world, to the wild west of cyberspace. It's a recognition that, you know, all the rules and the system is not fair for participation of all actors. So as we think about these fantastic ideas of empowering people, global, as it's called, citizens' assemblies, as Ella referred to, referenda, let's be aware, as many of the panelists, our young speakers, have brought up, that the situation is still highly unequal, and just getting people online, but to participate in effective ways, those issues need to be addressed. Fundamental questions of cybersecurity need to be addressed. Power imbalances, especially when you get to the most sophisticated technologies. Several of the speakers, starting with Sebastian, and I think Toma as well, spoke to artificial intelligence. I think you have your finger on the pulse of the critical issues of the moment, but absolutely, I think the UN is seeing this as more of an opportunity rather than the dark side of these technologies. And we need to continue to advise and work with the UN as a partner to make these tools empowerment, not just for better policy, better implementation, but actually empowering individuals, giving individuals agency to be part of the United Nations. This is the new UN 2.0 vision, I think, that many of us are talking about, starting with David's comment on a second San Francisco, a new San Francisco moment like we saw 75 years ago.
Hi there, is Natalie gone, or can we bring her on? Gosh, if digital UNs are going to have any future, they've got to do a better job at it than this. I'm watching about 20% of what you said. I look forward to seeing the recording, because I'm sure you've all said brilliant things, but I think Natalie's had to go. Richard Jolly never was able to join us from Lewis, and oh, Natalie, you're still there. I see you. Can you come back? No, yeah, come back, please. So tell us what you think of this idea so far.
No, thank you so much. I do have to go, but I did want to respond and also just again reiterate my commitment, you know, maybe through you, David, to help me connect, you know, the brilliant ideas and people we've heard today with the UN75 process. I stand by that. I really appreciate the thoughtful responses. I mean, I just wanted to play devil's advocate a little bit. I think what I've learned, is in my years as a campaigner for the UN is really, let's look at how we can best make progress whilst we wait for the bigger changes to happen as well, and keep pushing on those. So I'm not saying the idea of the Digital Security Council, for instance, is not something we should be striving for. It's just what can we do in the meantime to make some progress, to keep things moving. I think that was very much also the spirit, I think Tom touched on that, of the Paris Agreement. We need to just get something going here, because otherwise we're just waiting around for the kind of sort of perfect solution. So I would encourage you to think of I asked you what would come next, but also think about what could come before. What are the stepping stones? Shameless plug for the Together First report here. But what are the things that could really inch us, nudge us closer to these kinds of developments? And I think just go with what works. The treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, that's a fantastic example. There's so many criticisms. What's the point of it if the big nuclear powers aren't involved, blah, blah, blah. No, once you have these norms, once you have these mechanisms, you cannot put the genie back into the bottle. They're there, they're used. It's been the same with almost all other arms control treaties. So I do think all of this, should never, ever be a break to action. But don't wait around. And, don't wait for governments to act, don't wait for the UN to act. You do it, bring it to us, as you have done. And then, we'll take it from there. But find any way to make progress whilst not losing sight of the bigger picture change that you want. That would be my plea. I found this really inspiring. And I'll be in touch afterwards with David, and we'll see how we can get you guys heard in different spaces, because you were all fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Natalie. That's great to see you. Ed, I don't think they're going to answer your question, and I wonder if you would answer it on our behalf, and tell us what you think your answer to your question is. Can you come back, Ed Kessler?
Yeah, sure. I have to remember what my question was, David.
Your question was about our generation and how we deal with these problems, because clearly we're not dealing with them terribly well yet.
I think the first thing we need to do is to remember how to listen. I'm sorry, I can't remember which of the youth panel mentioned the word listen. But as you probably know, David, the word in Hebrew from the Bible is not passive, it's active. That when you listen, if you listen properly, then you actually act upon the listening. And it seems to me that my generation, although I was slightly disturbed to be called an elder, but nevertheless, I think the elders have to be more confident in the listening and in the acting upon that listening. So enough of the hand-wringing. Look at what a mess we're leaving behind, and I think we have to seriously act. Now, I am no expert on the UN or on the shenanigans of the political diplomacy that goes around the UN, but I do understand what happens when religions meet, and I do understand what impact religion and belief can have. And it seems to me that there are lessons to be learned from that in terms of engaging communities, in terms of reaching out to those communities, doing it in a language that isn't necessarily either indecipherable or threatening, but a language that's understood. It is about listening. It is about having the confidence to act in that listening. And I would not underestimate, finally, the importance of a serious moral and ethical reflection on these issues, because if you want to bring people with you, the ordinary people, the members of our communities on the ground, whether they're in our churches or mosques or synagogues or gurdwaras, if you want to bring them with you, then you have to engage with them in the way that we understand that language, not in a language that is indecipherable. Back to you, David.
Thanks, Ed. The young people are going to have their time alone to reflect on what they've heard. But before they go, I wondered if Tom Rivett-Carnac is still with us. Tom's not with us. So Sri, would you like, and please understand, this is intergenerational. And just because you're in the elders panel, Ed, you're not an elder. I know Sri's not a whole lot older than most of these people, but you represent part of this intergenerational dialogue, which needs to include everyone. So Sri, before the official young people go off the stage, what would you like to leave ringing in their ears?
Thanks very much, David. I think the message, that would be one of inclusion and, seeking to bring together people in a meaningful way through technology is not as easy as it sounds. Ultimately, David, you're in the UK here and you're experiencing these kind of challenges. And I think it's very apt that you are experiencing these kind of challenges on this platform, because I think it also shows the boundaries of technology. Unfortunately, the digital divide is one that is very real in the real world, and it is one that speaks to the haves and the have-nots. And I think the message would be that we need to find inclusion in technology, and we need to find ways of going beyond open source code to technology companies acting in a meaningful way. The development of hard infrastructure in developing countries can add to GDP, can add to economic entanglement and the formation of regional economic organizations. These are very pragmatic and real steps that, if the infrastructure was on the ground, would make a very meaningful difference in these people's lives. And I think the UN is something that can advocate for this. The youth mentioned that the profits of tech companies today dwarf that of some UN member states. And there's got to be a constructive way of looking at how to equitably distribute not just technology and knowledge, but also the profits of those technologies and knowledge, for it to be a human project, for the upskilling of the global population to be the ultimate goal of the United Nations and all those that believe in its altruism and its activities. Thank you.
Okay, Richard, do you have a final word to say to the young people before they go off for their time alone, talking about global partnerships, which is the first part of your 10 great ideas for the UN?
Yeah, just to say that civil society, beginning with young leaders, I hope you saw that only young leaders from within global civil society were given the opportunity to speak, and they spoke persuasively and eloquently to world leaders on the 21st of September. That was the start of the UN General Assembly. That's when they endorsed this declaration that I referred to earlier, which again has a commitment about these issues of digital cooperation. But the declaration, take a look at the declaration as soon as you can and see that it's kind of thin in terms of real specificity. So your ideas presented today can help to flesh out, to elaborate, to give some ambition. And there is a follow-on process that has begun. The Secretary General is mandated to give a report with great detail of implementing the 12 commitments in the declaration. So we need the young leaders involved in today's program, everybody who's participating in today's UN Day celebratory event, to participate actively in that conversation. There are many networks out there. You heard about Together First today. There's a related companion coalition called UN2020. Sign up, become active, and continue to be bold with your ideas.
Okay, so the young people have decided to skip the time alone and just come back with their thoughts on your advice and guidance and questions. Yes, I see you. Can you come on?
I am very much here.
Tom, I think you lost David, so please jump right in with your reactions.
No. Yes, he can. He's here.
David, everything all right? I'll just okay, great.
Yes,
great. Well, I've been listening very closely in the background to all of your comments. It's a pity Natalie's gone because I love skeptics and I love digging into skeptics. But I'll just have to do without that. The first thing I wanted to touch on, last night we had our digital security workshop, and really and truly there was a consensus inside the digital security workshop. We had experts from all over the world, and Shri, as you mentioned, it was highlighted that one of the main issues today with the UN that we would like to see the digital UN solve is the issue of participation and inclusivity. The UN cannot pertain to be a United Nations of we the peoples when the decisions taken at the UN are taken by a minority in the world, and the veto rights and things like that are done so in that fashion. So when Natalie said, what's next? Let's imagine that a digital UN was created, that a digital referendum was created, all of these things. What's next? Well, what next is exactly what we discussed last night. What's next is that we start to educate young people. We start with our generation, we start with the next generation to educate people on what we call digital hygiene. Now, what is digital hygiene? Digital hygiene is exactly when you tell your kids to look both ways when they cross the street, when you tell your kids not to accept candy from a stranger and jump into the stranger's van. Though that kind of advice is still valid today, but the advice that is even more valid is telling your kid, when you are online, do this. When you are online, make sure that your data is secure. Make sure that you know who you are talking to. Make sure that you know who is listening and who is using your data. Because as Sri said earlier, whose agenda does the technology serve? And make no mistake about it, the technology is serving the agenda of private companies, and our data is being exploited for financial gain and for manipulation in certain circumstances. We've heard of the US elections and so on and so forth. I could go on for a very long time. I know we're short on time, but that is what I wanted to say, that the digital UN, I do not think that it is some kind of a figment of imagination. As we heard about the 2015 summit, which is considered to be a diplomatic miracle still to this day, the digital UN is not a diplomatic miracle. I believe that it is something that would serve an immense purpose, and it would give voice and give a platform to many people who are not getting it today. The challenge is, how are we going to be able to execute this? How are we going to be able to convince people? And how are we going to be able to pull all this together with the leaders that we have today? If we're supposed to rely on member states, how are we going to pull all this together with the leaders that we have today? So I'm going to finish on that note, and I'll leave the floor to my colleagues to speak further on those topics.
Thank you, Toma. Given that we have 5 minutes left, I'm just going to head into a brief conclude. I think it was amazing, everything that we've heard so far. I especially like that Richard highlighted that the UN is taking AI as a positive thing. That's something we haven't talked about today. It absolutely is. It can help so much. It can, if you use data productively, it could really help humanitarian aid. It could help development. It could help in so many sectors. It's sad that Tom isn't here anymore. Tom Ravalkane, because he has a great podcast on optimism, which we are, I guess, sometimes lacking in the current climate. But just to end on a positive note, I think there are challenges as well as things to be looking for in the next years. And I think if we give the voice to the voiceless and to us young people, I think we will have a shot, and I think there's a good future waiting for us.
Hi, I'm not entirely sure if I'm completely connected, but fingers crossed. Yeah, I'm completely in agreement with everything that's been said. I've learned a lot from this discussion also. I think in summary, what comes to mind for me, and I think a lot of the people on the youth panel, would be that there is a need to reevaluate what we reflect on in terms of our ethics and our moral code, to mainstream intersectional voices in civil society, to better educate on the culture of online consent, I think, and educate individual online users on what their rights are and what that entails, and also their capacity for action when it comes to addressing these issues. And also developing some kind of framework, whether that be through a treaty, through a new Digital Security Council, for example, all of the ideas that have been thrown out, to be able to actively address real-time developments in terms of technology and modern development. So, yeah, thank you.
So first of all, thank you so much to all of the elders who are of different generations and different ages. Thank you so much for your contribution tonight. It's been incredible to hear from you. And to conclude and to summarize tonight, which would almost be impossible to do because the multifaceted nature of the issues we discussed are so complex, and the ability for people to come up with creative solutions absolutely blows me away consistently. But I think for us as young people, the divisive nature absolutely defines the inability of our current systems to create solutions to these problems. And for that reason, we need digital UN, we need citizens' assembly, we need creative solutions that go beyond governments and leaders. We need these solutions in order to eliminate the divides that previously held up solutions. We need a system that looks to everyone, not just the select few.
The most fun part for me was getting to know everyone.
You get to speak and communicate with students around your age all over the world, which is a really special opportunity that we don't often get.
I really enjoyed it.
For me, the most challenging part was when we had to shoot the town video. I think I have like half an hour of footage because I just played that one part over and over again.
Me and my mom were taking multiple takes.
Expressing myself because I'm not really good at it.
Trying to figure out what times the deadlines were in my time.
At home, I only talk a lot of Dutch. So when you were all talking English, I was like, oh my gosh.
When I laugh, all of us have to laugh. That was fun.
The most challenging part was when you had to keep a straight face. I never keep straight faces, and it is very hard for me to do that because I'm always fidgeting.
And the most challenging part was also keeping a serious
I do wish the world would sing. I do wish the world would say how they love to live in peace, how they need each other peace. That is all we want to have. That is all we want to share. Let us live our lives in peace. Let us give this life a chance to love. Love is all I need. Love is all I want. Love is everywhere. Peace, peace is all I want. Peace is all I need. Peace is everywhere. Teach us all to dance. I do wish the world would sing. I do wish the world would say how they love to live in peace, how they love to sing and dance. All we need is one more chance. Won't you give us one more chance to love? Love is all I need. Love is all I want. Love is everywhere. Peace, peace is all I want.
where we come, them and I never don't burn. ASEAN, European, them and I never don't burn. Salut, salam, shalom, salut, salam, shalom. Noir ou blanc, rouge ou jaune. Never bokriem, never yale ni bom. Never bokriem, never yale ni sac. Never bokriem, never tomada ma.
Freedom, freedom and justice is the melody that let us shine on. If you hear it through the music, we can make this world a better place. Freedom and justice is the melody that let us shine on. If you feel it through the music, we can make this world a better place. Freedom and justice is the melody that let us shine on. If you hear it through the music, we can make this world a better place. Freedom and justice is the melody that let us shine on. If you hear it through the music, we can make this world a better place. We can make this world a better place. We can make this world a better place. We can make this world a
Hello everyone, this is Mark Johnson with Playing for Change, a movement created to connect the world through music. I'd like to thank the United Nations Association and Peace Child International for inviting us to be a part of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. Playing for Change and the UN created a song around the world titled A Better Place, featuring musicians from all over the world who come from different locations, speak different languages, different religions, different political points of view. But no matter how many things in life divide us, they're never going to be as strong as the power of music to bring us back together again. So help us to celebrate the UN75 anniversary, and let's together make the world a better place. For more information, check out playingforchange.com, and sending love to all of you and your families. Thank you.